Hey guys. So obviously we've all entered a kind of new normal in this situation. I've actually been quarantined now for 17 days. I got sick kind of 2 weeks ago, and so in an effort to be preemptive, I took off a week of work, and then everything kind of came to a head here in Maine. And so we shut down service in the restaurant right when I was getting better. So I kind of ended up starting my official quarantine a little early. And so I've been kind of, back and forth trying to figure out some strategies that work for me. The reality is I often struggle without having kind of external structure in my life. I think that's why I really enjoy working in restaurants so much, because there are very definite structures to your day. You have a call time, you have to come in, service always starts at a certain time. And then, even down to the minute things of, a table sits down and within the first minute they need to be greeted, they need water, you need to have an initial conversation with them, and there really is there's a lot of wiggle room with regard to service and hospitality and the emotions you're creating and what you're choosing to serve them and how you're pitching things to them, but you are within this pre-existing structure, and then service ends and you stop and you have to accomplish a certain number of things before you clock out, and then you do it all over again. And so, as much as I've been one of those people who tends to fantasize about living more of a wanderlust or a freer, quote unquote, life, and being able to consult or be more self-structured. And I've attempted to do that at various times. I think a lot of you who know me know that the last year that I was living in New York, I was doing a lot more kind of event production and consulting. But the reality is that I never have been able to find a way to exist in that in a really productive way. I would kind of oscillate between slipping into depression and at the same time feel a lot of guilt and anger that I wasn't able to self-structure and hold myself accountable. And so given that this seems to be, the reality that's going to be present for an indefinite future, I'm trying to come to a place where I'm able to not be in constant anxiety of feeling like, oh, I have all this time and I should be accomplishing so much, and yet I'm not. That it is also a time of stress, and that, allowing for the creating of some space and the creating of some gentleness. So something that I've started doing, which seems really simple, but I've talked about it with a couple people, and it's also been working for them, is rather than trying to create a schedule that is based on time of day, or rather than trying to create a schedule that is based on the accomplishment of a certain task, I'm doing it a little kind of opposite, where I'm setting, I have a lot of things that I'm interested in doing, a lot of things that either I rarely had time for in my day-to-day. So be it exercise, be it reading, be it, finally getting into embroidery or ceramics or drawing and cooking, that sort of thing. And so obviously now is a great time to start exploring all of those things. But for me, at least, that can be really overwhelming, because how do you evaluate that you're doing things right? How does it feel like a success to you? How do we define success? And so what I've started doing is just using a timer. And I've been using an hour. For some things that's a little long. For some things I've been doing about 30 minutes. But basically, whatever in that moment I feel drawn to doing, so maybe I'm feeling a little more tired and I just want to sit. So that's a great time to read. And so I'll pick whatever I'm doing, whether, I have this whole stack of books over here that I'm working through. I have a bunch of New Yorkers sitting there on the ground. So, I'll get comfy and I'll grab my New Yorker and I'll set the timer for an hour and just read and just kind of work my way through that. And then when the timer goes off, if I'm still enjoying myself, I will continue or I won't. And so even if I'm halfway through a chapter or halfway through an article, if I feel done, I stop. And that way it isn't about finishing that chapter or finishing that article. It's just about the fact that I engaged in, to borrow terms from like yoga, I engaged in that practice for that amount of time, and that's enough. And same with, I think the embroidery is something. I've been working on this little project that is, I don't know what I'm doing. It's just kind of this little abstract patterning. And I've never really done embroidery. I just dropped the needle on the ground. I'll find that later. I've never really done this. I don't know what I'm doing. It is, it requires a little bit more focus, so that's one that I'll maybe do for 30 minutes, but again, I set that timer and I just do it for as long as the timer goes. And then again, wherever I am, when that timer goes off, I stop. And then I allow myself a time to kind of wander around the house. Maybe I'll get a drink of water. I'll check my Instagram, check my email, do all of those kind of like compulsive social media things. And then when I feel ready, I move on to the next thing. But again, rather than having a kind of daily structure where it's like, okay, I'm going to do this thing first and then this thing, I just do whatever feels good in that moment. I think often I've tried to create a schedule that's a little more based on an order of things, and I manage to, if I don't start the first thing on time or if I don't finish the first thing, I end up it derails the whole day. It derails it's kind of a domino effect. And so it's like, well, why bother moving on to the next thing? But this way, each thing is kind of isolated. And so it doesn't matter what time I start. If I sleep in, I start later. And then it also doesn't matter, each thing is its own little isolated moment of accomplishment. They're not based on each other. It's not sequential. And that allows me a lot more freedom to be able to just do what feels good in that moment. So like 3 days ago, I had a day where I was just feeling really good. I was in a really great mood. I was really excited about doing a lot of stuff. And so that day I managed to accomplish a ton. I, set a timer for kind of general like cleaning and plant care. So I watered all the plants, I did some pruning, I did some vacuuming, and I did some dishes, and then I read The New Yorker for an hour, and then I read fiction for an hour. I did the embroidery for 30 minutes while listening to an info session between the Department of Labor here in Maine and the Maine Justice League, which was really helpful. And I studied Italian using Duolingo, and that one is interesting because I kind of go as long as then you lose health. And so rather than buying health, I just do that for the amount of time I can because I don't have Duolingo Plus. I just keep going until I've run out of health. And then that's that, and I took a solid hour to like make myself a really nice little lunch. And then I sat down at the table and I ate that lunch, not looking at my phone. And, I just kind of, and then I did an online yoga, like a virtual yoga class for 45 minutes and then spent the last 15 minutes stretching. And then, yesterday I had kind of a lazy day. And so I did a little bit of reading. I am trying, to allow myself to like watch Netflix, but maybe I'm not watching just sitcom TV. Maybe I'm watching documentary TV. That feels a little bit more interesting to me. And like I'm learning something. And So it's been really interesting to find that I, at the end of the day, am accomplishing a lot more than I ever have day to day when I've been in a kind of non-classic structured work environment. And I feel really accomplished, but I am managing to kind of skirt all of the stress and the almost like self-shaming when I'm not being really proactive. And so it's been really wonderful to kind of use this strategy as a tool that like almost takes me out of my normal mental routine around this kind of self-structure and the shaming that I tend to engage in with myself. And yet on the flip side, there's a lot less anxiety, but I'm also accomplishing more than I normally do. So I don't know if this is going to be helpful for other people. I think obviously everybody works differently. And if it's more helpful to assign certain activities to certain times of day, and that works for you, that's great. But this was just something that I guess kind of taking from the really, quintessential mantra of like it's about the journey, not about the end, trying to untangle myself from the accomplishment of a task or the accomplishment of an activity. It's more about just like engaging in it for that amount of time. And even if I'm super distracted and I only read one page for that hour, which that's extreme, but it still feels good that I was able to engage in activity for an hour. So yeah, that's a strategy that I've been employing, and it feels really good to me. And I hope, having talked about it with a couple of other people and they've started doing it and it's working for them, I figured that it could be something that would be helpful. It's a way to feel like you're accomplishing things in a little bit more of a gentle way. And I'm really enjoying it. I would also love to hear what activities everybody's doing. I've been kind of finding a lot of random stuff, a lot of bucket list things that I'd always wanted to do, but I'm always open to new activities and new things to fill the time with. So yeah, well, thank you for listening, and hope everybody has a really great quarantine. Bye.